This is the Saber Coach Kate podcast, where I highlight the great thinkers, athletes, and coaches in the dynamic sport of Olympic fencing.
Guard. Boy, on it.
Damien Lehfeldt currently coaches epee at the Richmond Fencing Club. His fencing career began when he was a kid, continued through his years at Brandeis, led him to the Maccabi Games and a berth on the DC Fencers Club epee squad that took gold at the 2012 North American Cup, until one fateful day it occurred to him that he loved coaching more than competing. His website, thefencingcoach.com, earned an award as one of the top 50 fencing blogs at the beginning of 2018. He and his writing team post articles on a variety of topics, ranging from the role of women in fencing to a very personal entry about his recovery from a severe fencing injury. Damien can often be found on Facebook, fencing.net, Reddit, and other forums, leading wide-ranging discussions about contemporary societal issues. Tune in today to listen to one of the thought leaders of our sport talk about his experiences as a competitive fencer, Olympic epee coach, blogger, and die-hard Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan, Damien Lehfeldt. A heads up to any of you out there listening with your kids. There is a bit of profanity at the middle and the end of this interview. Hi, everybody out there listening. This is the Saber Coach Kate podcast, and I have a very special guest with me this evening. I have Damien Lehfeldt, who is also known online as the Fencing Coach. So, Damien, thank you so much for being with me here tonight.
Kate, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be on the show.
Let's start off with the standard, how did you become a fencer question?
Yeah, so that goes back for me to kindergarten. My best friend since kindergarten, he was one of my two best men in my wedding back in June. His dad was a fencer in Sweden, a guy named Håkan Linnaeus, and we were about 8 years old or so, and he brought us to the fencing club and put a sword in my hand, and I was like really into Star Wars and Three Musketeers and things like that. So as soon as I had a sword in my hand, I was like fell in love immediately, and been doing it since I was 8 years old.
Oh wow, that's really great. And which weapon or weapons do you fence, or did you fence?
I've dabbled in all three. I started off in foil, but when it came clear to me that I didn't really care for the right of way rules, and I was just kind of like, I get so frustrated. I didn't really understand what was going on as a little kid. Like, hey, I hit him first. Like, what's going on with that? And so my coach Janis Smolenski put an epee in my hand, and I haven't looked back since. It's been my love to fence epee. Saber is something I've played around with too, but epee is my true love.
Well, people say that the weapon chooses the fencer. What is it in particular that makes epee so appealing to you?
I think it's the strategery behind it. Like, foil and saber, you're kind of more reacting in the heat of the moment. I mean, that's not to undermine the strategy of the other two, but for me, epee feels like a true puzzle that you're solving. And so I always kind of embrace that. Plus, I love the fact that it's just like hit the other guy before he hits you. And the simplicity of the game is great, but there's that other dynamic layer of complexity that I personally think is above the other two weapons.
Okay, let's do a little word association game. Say the first word that comes to your mind. Okay, you ready? Okay, foil.
Not as good as you. Okay, no, I can't do that. It's got to be one word. Backflip.
Okay, and saber.
Screaming.
Okay, I'm proud of that one. Okay, how about epee?
Bouncing.
Okay, very good, very good. So you've been fencing a really long time then. So tell me some of the highlights of your fencing career.
Highlights. So my fencing career, it was not really spectacular when I look back on it. Like, I had a couple of junior points results. I don't think I never did 1 points or anything. I didn't have like any national teams or anything like that. For me, fencing and what makes it special was my journey in the sport and the friends I made over the years. Like, so many of my groomsmen were people that I met in fencing. And then, I realized how much I loved it when I started coaching as well. So when I look back on my fencing career, there's nothing to write home about, but two memories that really stand out in my mind. Like, one was the Maccabi Games a couple years ago, 2013. It was a team of myself, Charlie Horowitz, Gabe Weininger, and Adam Frank. We were down 34-40 going into the final bout against Germany. And they had, my teammates had enough faith to put me in as closer. I was around some really exceptional fencers in that tournament, and they had faith to put me in as closer. We came back from 40 to 34, one in overtime. I think that's one memory that comes to mind. The other one is DCFC is like a second family to me. In case you haven't seen, I have this DCFC tattoo.
Nice.
right on my arm. So 2012, the Virginia Beach NAC, like, I came in as alternate. I didn't really do much of anything on that team, but we won the NAC, and just doing that among the guys who I consider dear friends. It was one of those memories I look back on, and even though I wasn't really a true contributor like the other three guys on the team, I look back on that and just remember the emotions I felt when we had those gold medals around our necks, and how wonderful it was to share that memory with people who were so special to me, and coaches as well.
Well, it's really neat that your best memories come from the team events when we're in an individual sport, and it's pretty rare to have those opportunities to fence on a team. And I know for me too, I really enjoy those team events. So what is it about the team events that really appeals to you that way?
It's the energy that goes into the team. I mean, there's something really special to me about just the momentum that you can gain as a team. Just the adrenaline, the high fives, and just the collective energy that goes into a team event. Team relays were always my favorite form of fencing, and so it brought out the best of me as a fencer. Something about individuals, like I said, I never really had the marquee results, but when I knew that other people were leaning on me in team fencing, it brought out an energy and passion that I didn't ever really feel from individuals. So I love team fencing. I will always answer the call if somebody says, "Hey, Damien, you want to do team?" It's to me, it's the most fun kind of fencing.
Talk to me about your coaches and any other people that had an impact on your fencing.
Yeah, I mean, the first person that comes to mind there is Janusz Smolensky from DCFC. I don't know how well you know Janusz. He's a head coach over there. And outside of my own family, I can't think of somebody who I admire quite like Janusz. He's one of those coaches that has just this incredible insight and wisdom. It's both from a fencing perspective in that he's a wizard with how he sees things on the strip, but then he's also kind of this amazing life coach off the strip as well. And I've learned a lot from him. And I think if you really want to see the love of fencing that a coach fosters in their students, like, look at how many of them after college are coming back to a club and choosing to continue fencing, right? You're no longer doing this sport because it's going to get you into a good college or whatever. You're doing it because you have a true love fostered in the sport. And if you go into DCFC, you will see so many college alumni who come back and they fence because of the coaches there, like Janusz and Robert, who really create this love of the sport in their students. And then outside of that, those two, Mario Jalev down in South Florida, Boyko Krasnovich at Tampa Fencing Academy. Those were the coaches I was working with in high school when I lived in Florida. And they're exceptional people, exceptional teachers, and were very selfless with teaching me not just fencing, but coaching as well. So, yeah, I'm like getting emotional just talking about these people. They've been such an important part of my life.
Wow, that's really great. Are there any fencers that stand out to you? Any teammates? You mentioned a couple, but maybe somebody back in high school?
Yeah. I mean, in Florida when I was growing up, the late, great Bob Cochran is the guy that comes to mind for me. Bob was the guy to beat in Florida. You have this 6'6" giant French gripping lefty, and he was the guy who just beat us all the little kids on the strip, and we all wanted to. He was the guy to beat. And when I started training down with Mario at South Florida Fencing Academy, Bob was there, and I learned so much from him. Just a wonderful human being. We lost Bob just a little bit over a year ago. But if you talk to referees, fencers who interacted with Bob, he is to me what defines a true fencer. And I mean that as somebody who is a fierce competitor on the strip, a gentleman off the strip. And he had this kind of joie de vivre that very few fencers have. And I miss him dearly. Every time I go to a NAC and, here's the cat.
Yeah, it's Ivan. He's coming to say hi.
What's up, Ivan? Just every time I go to a NAC now and Bob's not there, it's just it's a reminder to me of the huge presence that he had in the sport, and I miss him dearly.
We have a guy down here in Texas who's like that, Ray Sexton, and
Oh, sure.
Yeah, he's the guy that everybody always wants to beat.
Yeah.
He's been around forever, and has all those old wily tricks.
Oh, sure. I've fenced Ray before. He's got those tricks indeed. He's awesome fencer.
Yes, and a really good human being. What's the best advice you received as a fencer?
I think that came from. I think that probably came from Bill Shipman, my coach in college. He really told me to not take myself so seriously. There was a couple of years ago, like kind of one of those crazy life moments in fencing that I was coaching at the Memphis Junior Olympics. I want to say 2010. I land in Memphis. I open up my phone. I have a text from my dad that had informed me that my grandma had passed away while I was in transit there. And I'm like sitting there, just in this terrible state. And Bill Shipman, he picks me up, takes me out to dinner at this really good fried chicken place. He knows all the good Southern barbecue places. If you ever need to know, you go to Bill Shipman. And he taught me, just don't take yourself so seriously. I think when I started coaching, I was almost I was super temperamental. I was always about results. And I wasn't tapping into the fun side of the sport. And it's such a fun sport. And I was not seeing the forest through the trees as a coach, as a fencer. And Bill was the one who really taught me to not take myself so seriously. I'm grateful for that. I think that's something I carry with me now. I laugh a lot more when I'm coaching. I'm having a lot more fun with fencing and messing around. And that's advice I'd give to any fencer. It's a fun sport. It's a great sport. It's the greatest sport. Don't take it so damn seriously. And I learned that from Bill.
All right. You went to college in Brandeis. And
I did.
You got to be a 4-year starter there. Talk about some of your experiences as a college fencer.
Yeah, man. I had such an amazing time at Brandeis. I was involved in a million activities. Like I was probably sleeping like 2 hours a night. But I was doing a fraternity. I played rugby there. I ran track. Believe it or not, I sang in an a cappella group too when I was at Brandeis. But when I look back on my 4 years there, nothing defines my college experience like the Brandeis fencing team. We were super tight knit. We just had fun together as a team. I'm pretty sure that we killed more kegs and 40s combined, compared to the rest of the athletic department. And Bill Shipman, who I mentioned before, he's been at Brandeis now for like 35 years. And, you think about what great coaches and the qualities that they have in them. He really pushed our team to overachieve. We had no business winning some of the matches that we did. Like, we came into Harvard the year after they had won NCAA championships, and we beat them at, in an away meet. We won this bean pot tournament. So he was really good about pushing us to overachieve and really, really tapping into us to get the best out of us. And Bill runs a great program there. And so when I look back at Brandeis and my experience there, it's about the fencing team and the really great memories that we had together.
Well, and I found somewhere on the internet that you had a couple of nicknames during your college years.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, Bobo McGiggles and Dimebag. Do you have any idea where those came from?
So I don't remember those, but the nickname that really stuck, people kind of said it more than Damien, was Brendan Doris Pierce, who's now, he was a captain when I was a sophomore, I think. And he started calling me Chipper. And the reason he called me Chipper was because apparently when I yell after a touch, I sound like I'm being thrown into a woodcutter feet first. So that's the nickname that really stuck. That came from Brendan Doris Pierce, who everyone knows the BDP. But yeah, I don't remember those other two. I'm gonna have to look that up. Dimebag. What was the other one you said?
Bobo McGiggles.
I can honestly say I have no idea where those came from, but Chipper was the one that came out. Yeah, that I remember.
Well, then there are lies about you on some page then on the internet.
All right, I will take those lies down.
All right.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Yeah.
You've talked several times already about your coaching. Why did you decide to become a coach in the first place?
Oh, it just kind of came to me. I graduated in 2009, which is like peak of the Great Recession, and I moved back home to Florida, Tampa, where my parents lived, and I was like trying to find work, and I couldn't find anything. I was like applying to jobs left and right, and so while I was there, I was just like, all right, I'm going to coach boxing and I'm going to coach fencing. So I would, in the mornings, I go to this boxing club that was down there, and I would teach a bunch of middle-aged people how to or how to box, rather. And then at night, get in the car, go over, pull out my blades, and start coaching over at Tampa Fencing Academy. And my coach, Boyko, who I worked with throughout high school, he was kind enough to let me come work for him. And so it just kind of came to me. It was a job when I didn't have anything coming out of college, and then I quickly realized just how much I enjoyed working with kids and motivating them, and it tapped a part of me that was like, wow, I should have been doing this a lot earlier. This is really my passion, even more than fencing.
Mm-hmm. And how did your coach teach you how to be a coach? Did you just watch him and emulate him, or did he sit you down for training sessions? I mean, what was your coaching education like?
I've had no real formal coaching education. Everything I've done is through emulation. So Boyko was a great coach, and I would just sit down, watch his lessons, try to soak up as much as I could. Mario Jalev, who I mentioned before, down in South Florida, his coaching style is all about reading and reacting. It's not about it's not about telling you what you're seeing. It's about showing you like subtle lines and reacting to them. So, how like Neo in the Matrix, like his first meeting with Morpheus, just like mind is blown, and all of a sudden he's able to do all this crazy stuff that he didn't know he was capable of. That's kind of what Mario unlocked in me, both as a fencer and a coach. And then, when I moved back up to DC, I think I moved back up in 2010, 2011, but DCFC was just so loaded with coaches like Ilya Lobanenko. I'd watch his lessons, Janusz, who I mentioned before, Robert. So I would just sit there at the end of my training and just watch everything that they were doing and then try to emulate it myself. So I have no formal training. Everything has been by watching some really, really fine coaches, and I've been in the right places at the right time to learn from a lot of people like them.
And you're currently a coach at the Richmond Fencing Club. Talk about how a successful club dynamic is built and your part in doing that at that club.
Yeah, so I'm having a ton of fun at Richmond Fencing Club. I moved down to Richmond for a job about two and a half years ago. Joined Richmond Fencing Club, and it's owned by the Lucentes, Tom and Cindy. I don't know if you know them, but the culture that they've created in this club makes it fun. I think we associate club drama a lot with fencing, and you have coaches who are very territorial, and they say, like, this is my student, you will not work with them, and this is how it is, and then you see them kind of splinter off and form their own clubs. What we have at Richmond, and what Tom and Cindy have done a great job of creating, is like we have this kind of it takes a village mentality with coaching. Like, everybody is involved in everybody's student, and that's for the betterment of the student. We're politics drama free. We're about fostering a love of fencing, making great fencers. And a story that comes to mind, like one of the parents approached me about giving saber lessons to a kid, and he was already working with our primary saber coach, a gentleman named Matt Stone. And like, I sauntered up to Matt Stone, kind of like tail between my legs, and I was like, "Hey, man, they just came to me about coaching. I don't want to like do anything, but is it cool if I work with your student?" And he looked at me like I had like 3 heads, and he's like, "Yeah, man, that's cool. Go for it." And I'm like, yeah, that never happens in a club. So we have a very, very great community dynamic too, and I encourage clubs to really break down the barriers and the politics that can exist with coaching. We're doing that really well at Richmond Fencing Club, and I'm telling you, I'm having more fun, I think, coaching than I have just about any other club.
Well, and it's good for a student to work with several coaches anyway. You might have a different handed coach. You might just have, different cues, and I just think it makes them a better fencer, like you were saying.
Absolutely. Growing up in Florida, we're in a lot of clubs, so I would be working with like 6 different coaches, and you got to learn to kind of figure out what works for you and what might not. But at the same time, I don't think there's a lot of downside to working with multiple coaches if you can filter out what works and align with them philosophically.
Let's backtrack just a little bit, because in 2012, you got to coach a pentathlete at the London Olympics. Can you tell me a little bit about your student and how that coaching experience was similar to and different from coaching other high-level events?
Yeah, so my student who made it, her name was Suzanne Stenius, and I know coaches are not supposed to pick favorites of students, but she was my favorite. And I say that because Suzanne, she's just like one of the most wonderful people. Like, she's just this passionate ball of energy. She's one of the funniest people I know. And it was just as much a coaching relationship as it was a friendship, and so we just had a ton of fun working together. And you had asked about what it's like compared to a NAC. Holy crap! It's a lot of pressure. With a NAC, you go to a few of them a year. And unless you're trying to make a national team or whatever, like there's more room for error. You're like, you don't make a points around one knack. It's like, whatever, I've got, the March knack coming up. It's all good. I'll make it up then. And, with the Olympics, particularly in pentathlon, you're one of two pentathletes qualifying from each country in a very loaded field. And then, combine that with the fact that the games are every 4 years and most of your Olympians are only going to get one shot to do it. So it all boils down to that competition day. And I can't remember if Suzanne slept the night before competition, but I know I didn't. I was just like, sit in my bed, like eyes at the ceiling, like jitters. And then if I would start to drift off to sleep, I would wake up all of a sudden like, oh my God, this is happening. It's for real tomorrow. We've been working together for years and it all boils down to this. But when I look back on that, I am still grateful that she believed in me as a coach enough. I was like 24, 25 years old when we started working together, to put that trust in me to carry to help carry her to the games. And she had amazing coaches in all of her other sports behind her too. Jeff Heiston in swimming, her dad, Willie Statinius, was her shooting and riding coach, and Karen Dubbs, her strength and conditioning coach. Like we all bonded together very nicely during the Olympic Games too. So grateful for that opportunity. I keep in touch with her to this day. She just had a beautiful son, and I get chills even talking about this. It was just a wonderful experience.
Wow. Well, to be so young and to be coaching at such a high level, I mean, what a great start to your coaching career.
Yeah, it was once in a lifetime experience. It really was, and I don't think I'll ever feel the pride and joy I did when she walked out, out of the tunnel and started competing in the games. But fencing is 1/5 of pentathlon, and I deserve very little credit for that whole thing because she had a lot of other coaches behind her that were doing a great job in their respective areas of pentathlon as well. So I was in the right place at the right time. I'm grateful I was there, and I will never forget that experience.
You're still a very active competitor yourself. What are the advantages and disadvantages of coaching while still being an active competitor?
Yeah, so I actually, after I don't remember exactly where I placed it this last Virginia Beach snack back in January, but if you scroll to the bottom of the list and then up a couple clicks on your mouse, you're likely to find where I was at. So I've actually recently decided to hang it up from my competitive career. It's just kind of like, at this point, I'm working a full-time job. I'm married, only so many hours in a week. And so I decided to hang it up. And you know what, in case you can't hear from the tone of my voice, I'm not sad about it at all. Like I mentioned before, I didn't really do a lot of stuff in my fencing career that's worth writing home about. So yeah, it's now about coaching for me. And that was what I found to be my true love. So in terms of balancing the two, I think it's really tough, to be honest. And if you want to be a serious competitor, you kind of have to pick one or the other. I think a lot of people say oh, it's a disadvantage because you're getting hit over and over again and you get used to that. But I kind of disagree with that. I think the biggest disadvantage is that, when you have a lot of students and only so many hours in the stall, you're allocating your time to limited amount of time to your students. And so, in terms of your technique and your fundamentals, when you only have so many hours to work on those and your footwork, they start to suffer. And so that said, even though I've kind of wrapped up my career, I value the time I have as a coach, and it's been my true passion all along.
Well, it obviously is your true passion because you have a blog that you call The Fencing Coach. So you are the fencing coach on the internet.
The fencing coach.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all capitals, so, it's you are the coach.
Yeah, monopoly on the market, right?
Right. Why did you start that blog?
So like right before the London Olympics, I was like, I guess I'll like start a blog to keep my friends updated. So I originally started on like Tumblr. I don't even know if Tumblr like exists anymore. It's kind of a defunct social. It's not like MySpace level. Remember MySpace where like Tom forced you to be his friend and everything? And
Yeah.
but after that, I was like, all right, I'm gonna check and see. Like, Shot in the Dark is thefencingcoach.com registered as a domain name because it's like pretty solid domain name. So I took it and I ran with it and I started writing. I was writing like crazy in the beginning, and like I all of a sudden was like looking at my reads and things like that, and I'm like, oh, people are actually listening to the crap I'm putting out here, and it's now like 5 years down the road after starting it, yeah, it's taken off, and I'm in awe kind of where it's gone in the last couple of years, and the community that's been built around the for lack of a better term, for the bullshit I spew on the internet.
Well, there aren't a whole lot of blogs out there. I mean, I think yours was one of the first ones. And so I think there's a real need for fencing to be on social media and to be out there on the internet. And I think you really started a good thing and a good service for the community.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Kate.
Now, you do have a team of writers that you put together for this blog. I'm sure it got a little overwhelming with the career and, the fiance at the time and all that. And
Yeah.
What do you look for in a person that qualifies them to write for your blog?
I think I'm looking for the same thing that I do in my own students, which is like people who love the sport to the point that they're like doing actions in their sleep. And you can actually ask my wife, like sometimes I'll like be sleeping and then I'll be like Perry 6 repost, and I digress. I'm not gonna. That's personal stuff. I'm not gonna go into that too much anyhow. But yeah, I'm grateful for the team that of writers and contributors that I have. The blog would not have grown like it did if it was not for them. Hannah Provenza was the first person who I brought on board, and she's like one of the hardest working epeists out there, and she's been really helpful in coaching me as a writer and my voice as the owner of the blog. So I'm grateful for her. I think Leland Guillemon came on next. He was on the Canadian national team a couple of years ago, and he's retired from competition now. But I think he's still got the competitive itch in him, and I want to poke it and get it out of him and get him defense again. And I've never met the guy in my life, but just from our interactions over the years, at this point, I feel like he's a good friend. So he was another great addition to the blog. James Weiss, he was one of my teammates on the Maccabi team. He came on next. He's been great about tying in fencing and culture and how it fits in the greater culture and the zeitgeist, as he calls it. And then Monica Aksamet, that name speaks for itself. I don't know what I did to deserve as great a competitor and fencer and writer as her, but she's been great at giving us a lens of high-level fencing that, I never got anywhere near. And then lastly, Anna Maria Liu. She came on, and my God, I'm grateful to have her because, she's a fine referee, up-and-coming referee, and that's great. She's our resident rules expert, but what I really, really admire about Anna Maria is that she was one of the first women in fencing and refereeing in particular to look at the status quo and say, what is happening here is wrong. It ain't right. And she started breaking down the Good Old Boys Network. And I say started because she's got a long way to go, and we have a long way to go as a sport. But Anna Maria has had great courage to come out against it and attack it head on. And I'm super proud of her and super honored to have her as a writer. So that's our team. And blog would never have grown to its audience without those people.
What is one of your favorite blog entries? Either one that you've written or one that your team has written?
Oh man, that's tough. I think My open letter to fencing parents that I wrote, I think that's one that comes to mind. I think of how important parents are in fencing to creating a love of the sport, and working in tandem with the coach and the fencer to channel that true passion of fencing. And I think that open letter articulated it well. I think the other post that comes to mind is about a year ago, I finished writing this post. It took me about 2.5, 3 years to write. I had a friend of mine in high school who, to get super serious here for a moment, he was a guy who I trained with in high school and wound up going to jail for life without possibility of parole for his involvement in the murder of a young 13-year-old boy. And it was devastating to watch this all unfold. This is somebody who is the opposite of a profile of a serial killer that you would not a serial killer. And the devastation that it had on our community at this club was vast. And it was painful to write this. Like I said, it took me 2.5, 3 years to write. But when I finally got it on paper, it was like cathartic. So that one really comes to mind as a post that's one of my favorites.
You also blogged, there were several blog posts that you did about the injury that you received.
Yeah.
When you blogged about it, was it to warn people about the dangers of fencing, or was there some other purpose that you had in documenting all of that?
Yeah, I'll be honest. Like when I tore my Achilles, and I wrote that injury series, like there's some posts that I write for the community, and then there's some posts that I write like for me. Right after I tore my Achilles, like I had this like maelstrom of emotions that I need to get them on paper because I had like this huge sense of anger and helplessness, and I didn't want to compartmentalize it. And so I started writing this whole injury series. And so it was originally for me, but I've had multiple people email me about that series. Like most recently, a fencer emailed me about it a month ago and was like, "Hey, thank you so much for your honesty in that post. Like I kind of felt like I needed to be a tough guy going through this, but after reading what it's like to go through a catastrophic injury like an Achilles tear, like he said, thank you for your honesty in that." And so now I'm glad that it's helping people cope with injuries and that it's inspiring people to get through them. And, lesson is like kids, spend time stretching and getting flexible. It is important. 28-year-olds should not tear their Achilles tendons, but that's what I did.
On a little bit less serious note, talk to me about something that you organize every year called March Stabbness.
Yeah.
I love the title. It's amazing.
Yeah, so hat tip to DC. There was a DCFC parent named Genevieve Dietrich. She actually is the one who coined the term. I'd love to take credit for that, but it was Genevieve Dietrich who really came up with that term. And, that's in reference to NCAA fencing, which is one of my favorite tournaments of the year. You see the best and the brightest young fencers, future Olympians who go in, and I think they're at Penn State this year in March. But then every single year, somebody usually organizes a fantasy fencing bracket. That's not organized by me. I actually forget off the top of my head who does it, but keep an eye out for it. I encourage everyone to get involved. It's awesome every year.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I don't know many of the college fencers, but I always participate. It's just fun to take a stab in the dark.
Nice pun. I dig it.
Now, back to something a little more serious.
Yeah.
You wrote a blog post entitled "When the Mask is On" women in fencing about 3 years ago. And you regularly make posts on Facebook in support of women and women's rights. What are your views on the Me Too movement? And what, if anything, does fencing need to do to be more inclusive and support women?
Yeah, so I'll start off with the Me Too movement. I feel about it the same way that I do about Black Lives Matter. And to me, it's like a very simple concept. It isn't rocket science, like these movements are predicated on this very simple idea that marginalized people wish to be treated with equality. Women want to be able to perform their jobs without facing sexual harassment. That's not controversial to me. They want to be able to walk down the street without being ogled by, perverted men. That's not controversial to me. They want to promote a culture of consent. Again, not controversial to me. If I've said anything controversial so far, let me know. And, I talked to my wife and my sister, and they're both people who have just been walking down the street, minding their own business. All of a sudden, they get flashed by some random unsolicited penis in public. They don't want that. That's not controversial to me either. And so, I consider myself personally to be conservative on a lot of issues. But to me, Me Too, it's a matter of human decency. And unfortunately, fencing still lacks that kind of human decency that you would expect of a sport as great as fencing. Like over the years, how many great female referees have you seen leave the sport because they finally said enough of this crap? And how many times have you seen fencing's leadership turn a blind eye to that harassment because of the power dynamics that exist in the sport? So to me, it's disgusting, it's unfair, and it needs to change.
And how can we change it?
Well, keep in mind, first of all, fencing is a sport where women are the leaders. I'll ask you right now, and you probably are going to come up with this off the top of your head. Who's the greatest fencer of all time?
Vasali.
Bingo. It's undisputed. She had 6 Olympic golds. She had 16 world championship golds. She had, I forget how many European championships. She had an absurd number of them. And in the United States, who's the greatest fencer of all time in the United States?
Zagunis.
Bingo. And you look at her and what she's done, 2 Olympic golds, multiple world championships. And I mean, look at her counterparts on the team, Seda Jacobson, Rebecca Ward, and then all the women like Monica and Ibtihaj who took the bronze in Rio. And, Ibti's kind of leading the front on her own. And then Lee Kiefer in foil just won 4 times NCAA championships as an individual, and she's like top 3 in the world now. So women are leading the sport. I think people forget that sometimes, but they are our leaders in the sport. And that said, in terms of what we can do, I think we need to get more women on the national team. And we could probably spend a whole nother podcast talking about this whole issue, but I think that comes to mind. We can get more women coaching on the national team. I'd like to see, in refereeing in particular, a good starting point would be to establish some stringent feedback guidelines. Because right now you have cases of female refs told, quote, "You're too young to be professional." Now, I'm telling you, I read this ethics report, and you had somebody coming to a female and saying, "You're too young to be professional." And when she responded negatively to this statement, she was told, "Why don't you go cry about it?"
Wow.
So I think we have right now a lot of this kind of abusive feedback and framework that exists in refereeing, that if you tried to pull that in the private sector, you'd be fired within days, as you should be. So I think we need to look at that as well. Just, feedback and being able to create a culture that assesses our referees not by their gender, not through some shady political lens that we have now, but just on your performance. It's not, again, not controversial, but we need to get out of this dinosaur mentality that we have.
Mm-hmm. Well, I really hope that we are able to make inroads into that, because it is definitely an important topic that needs to be explored on a variety of levels.
Definitely.
Yeah. Another one, U.S. gymnastics has just gone completely haywire here with the Dr.
Good Lord.
controversy. What should U.S. fencing do to make sure that what just happened to U.S. gymnastics doesn't happen in our sport?
Well, first of all, it's already happening in our sport. Go to the band U.S. fencing members list and, dig into some of the reasons why some of these folks are banned for life. And there's some truly chilling things in there. So it's already underway. But I think U.S. fencing needs to have a serious, long, hard look at its leadership. Like, I don't know if you heard about this. There's something terribly wrong to me. There's a member of the board of U.S. fencing who pulled all the referees together at the last NAC. And you know what he said to them? He said, "Stop filing so many ethics and harassment complaints. It's too much paperwork for me, and it's taking too much time." He said that.
Yeah.
I've talked to multiple people that said this occurred.
Yeah.
And that's backwards ass thinking to me. I'm going to give you a revolutionary idea here. You ready?
I'm ready. Hit me.
If you want, less harassment paperwork to deal with, stop enabling a hostile work environment. If we don't want the sport that we love to become like U.S. gymnastics or U.S. swimming, even start with some abhorrent opposition to harassment and a culture that we have in the sport that silences and undermines victims of this terrible harassment that so many of our referees and fencers face. I don't know how much you read into the Nassar trial, but Allie Reisman, a famed U.S. gymnast, she said that a lot of the victims of Nassar spoke out against him, over the years and against Michigan State, his employer. And they were just ignored. They were dismissed. And the end result was he had over 100 women who were abused.
Yes.
So referees aren't filling out harassment paperwork, because they're having fun filling it out and they just want to fill it out. They're filling it out because they're victims of this systemic harassment that's been enabled in our sport since the dinosaurs. And to be clear, it's usually the guys who have been around since the dinosaurs who turn a blind eye to this crap. So you tell me who the villain is in this situation. Is it the guy who can't be bothered to process the paperwork, or is it the refs who want to be treated with equality? So I think it starts with our leadership. They're doing a terrible job. And I think we need to scrap them in the coming elections.
What can just regular average Joe who's at a tournament do to help better this whole environment?
Yeah, I think if you're part of this system and you're a male referee and you hear something that is not okay and is not appropriate, don't be silent. Say something. And luckily, we have a huge coalition of people now who are saying this is not okay. Ivan Lee, who I admire so much as a human being and a fencer, he just issued a statement about this. I just think we need more allies coming out and not turning a blind eye to this, but vehemently fighting against it. And I think it starts there. Mm-hmm. And just establishing that common ground of what's right and what's wrong and fighting against it head on, and not just being silent when we hear things like, "Stop filing so much harassment paperwork, it inconveniences me, let's target it head on."
All right. Well, thank you for your views on that. One last question before I move on to our last section. This has nothing to do with fencing at all, but I see you often on Facebook with your obsession with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So
yeah,
I know you lived in Florida. Is that where this obsession stems from?
Yeah. We haven't. Oh, my Bucks. God, we suck. We haven't won a playoff game since 2002. We haven't even been to the playoffs since 2007. But you kind of, you hold out hope, unwavering hope that that they're gonna rebound and do well.
Maybe this season will be the season.
Every season we say that, and every season we suck. I've never believed in bandwagoning a team, right? If you really love a team, be willing to ride the worst of times, because the victory tastes that much sweeter when you get through it. So I love the Bucks. Nothing will ever change that. I'm obsessed. They're my team, and we will one day rise to the prominence that we did in 2002. Until then, I will cry.
And keep your fingers crossed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right, we'll finish up this interview with a mixture of famous questions from James Lipton and Marcel Proust.
All right.
All right, what is your favorite word?
Kofifi.
What is your least favorite word?
MAGA.
What sound or noise do you love?
The sound an epee makes when the tip compresses. I call it click music. It's so great. You know, just like that little, I love it. It's great.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Teenage fencer screaming.
Male or female?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, our favorites are always the Y14s when they get up into the supersonic, you know.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, just something about my ears and the way I hear it just breaks my eardrums. Not a fan.
What profession, other than your own, would you like to attempt?
My ideal retirement when I'm done with my career is, you know, being this old man, tapping into his 401k and whatever, and showing up at the fencing club and just giving lessons till the cows come home. That's my ideal profession. I think when I'm in retirement, I want to be at the club every night getting lessons.
Nice. What profession would you not like to do?
I would have said refereeing, till a few weeks ago, but now I'm apparently working like the March and April NACs. So
How did that happen?
I don't know, Kate. I'm a glutton for punishment, so I'm doing that. I don't know why, but really, for me, I'd do any job. Like that year after graduation where I was like doing nothing and going nowhere with my life. Like I kind of think working is a privilege, and I would do whatever. Like I've never taken it for granted, and you can put me in any job and I'll be optimistic and have fun in any role. So I'd do anything really.
Well, and eating is always good, so.
I love food. Yeah.
Money coming in so that you can eat. That's always a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Roof over the head. That's Agreed.
Where would you like to live?
I'm really happy in Richmond right now. I didn't think I would be when I moved down here, but I love it here. But down the road, move back to Florida, be one of those stereotypical snowbirds and make my way down there for retirement. We'll see. I don't know. I'm really happy anywhere I go as long as my wife is with me.
And your dog.
And my dog. My little fluffball, yes.
What do you value most in your friends?
Loyalty, I guess. Like my groomsmen in my wedding, that just happened back in June. Most of them I knew, by the time I turned 10 years old. And, we've seen kind of like the best of times together, the worst of times together, and gone through it thick and thin. And so I think, just loyalty is so important, and having those shared experiences through adversity and good times. And that's probably what I value the most.
Who is your hero?
I'm going to go with my wife. And I say that because I've never seen somebody who sees the world with such amazing perspective like she does. She's like one of the funniest people I know as well. And then, I come home some days after really tough days of work and fencing, and she always turns my really bad days into blessings without fail. So I go with my wife, and also she puts up with me, and anybody in the fencing community who knows me knows that is a very difficult proposition, but she does. So I'd say she's my hero. She's the best.
That's really great. And last one, what is your motto?
Get shit done.
And on that happy note, this interview draws to a close. Damien, thank you so much. This has been really, really great.
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, I had a great time, and I would gladly do it again in a heartbeat. A lot of fun doing this, and you're doing great things with your podcast and your blog, so keep it up, and thanks again for having me on.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. I'd like to give a big thank you to my sound engineer and teammate, Tony Escueda, who creates all the music for this podcast and who edits all of the interviews. I'd also like to thank my husband and executive producer, David Sierra, who helps me read over all of the questions that I've developed and to come up with some creative ones. A big thank you as well to my sponsor, Cutting Edge Fencing, who provides me with the funds for all of the Saber Coach Kate podcast swag, like the stickers, patches, and pins that you see me carrying around at tournaments throughout the country. If you want to get in touch with me about any topics that you'd like me to touch on or people that you'd like me to interview, you can contact me at sabercoachkate@gmail.com. Any episodes of this podcast can be found on my blog, sabercoachkate.wordpress.com. I also have a new YouTube channel where you can find the audio of all of my previous podcast episodes, as well as an occasional special video. Just check out the Saber Coach Kate channel on YouTube. Thank you very much for listening.